we have with us again Laure Jackson, who is the expert in all things sensory stuff. And I've evolved from sensory stuff to sensory needs, sensory issues. So I'm already learning. Hi, Anne. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Good to see you.
Every day's a learning day, isn't it?
As it ought to be.
As it should be, yes. We always learn new things. It's brilliant. Last week we touched upon issues around somebody who'd had a brain trauma from brain cancer earlier on, who's an adult now and was having issues with how do I do better remembering things because he's got specific brain trauma. But the other part, which I just wanted to reflect on, was he said people really don't get his struggle. So they'll say, oh, yes, I forget things sometimes too, which, whilst it may be inherently true, is actually then undermining his genuine, I have a brain trauma, not just I'm a bit forgetful. So it's encouraging that he was so encouraged by you. But yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? When we can see the disabled badge on a car and someone gets out in a wheelchair, fine, they're disabled. But we don't understand perhaps when someone gets out of a car in a wheelchair bay, but there's no wheelchair and they're walking. Because we don't understand that even someone who's got extra needs, they're not always going to be, perfectly linear. They're going to have good days and bad days. So have you got a kind of a more general response? How do we educate people with our own specific needs without being overly offensive or unnecessarily defensive? How can we go into a situation better when we've got additional needs, specifically, obviously, for you with the sensory issues?
Yeah, it is one of the biggest things. I think if we can check our own heart and acknowledge that folk are coming from a place of not understanding, so that first they will be able to hear anything that we do have to say, anything that we do have to communicate, that at least not be put off by our very essence of our very being. Because if we are absolutely defensive, or we are frustrated, or we've just had enough, we're just fed up that folks don't understand and they just don't get it. It's like we need grace, we need compassion, we need a real dose of goodness, of godness just in us to infiltrate that through. So in the first instance, how we are and how we respond to things is absolutely how God would want us to do. So, but then we do need to educate. We do need to talk, and it's a combination of regular things that are out there. We might have little books. There might be, if it's children's stories, to help other children understand. There are books that other children might be able to read. The parent can pass to parent. It's nice if you can create a little story about your own family, if you want other families to understand, and that's a way that they will understand it. So you can write a little book about it, write a little leaflet about yourself. I think having those also little lanyards, the sunflower little lanyards that folks have as a way of communicating if you're going through an airport, the special assistance, anything that we can find that will signpost people when it's not obvious from the outside, as a way of at least raising awareness in community that we are different, something is different.
So we're talking about how we can help others understand our situation. Because you were talking about at the airport, you can have like a lanyard that can then alert people. But I really like the idea of a book, because that's a great way of engaging, especially children, to help them understand, because our normal isn't necessarily everybody else's normal, is it? So actually helping ourselves as a family to realise, well, this is what we go through every day, but people don't know that. So, I love the book. Have you seen some of those?
I've advised folk to do that. And
That'd
folks,
be really good.
I know they've written their own little things. It's part of the Sensory Super System that there are communication tools that we've developed. I haven't seen a published one, but I've seen ones that families have literally just put together. They've got pictures of themselves, of their family, how they work. They've written a little description, and it's really lovely. It's really lovely. And it helps. It's something you can read to others, and then the children can understand as well as other adults.
We don't know what we don't know. It's just a phrase I use fairly frequently. We don't know what we haven't yet been told.
Yeah.
And what's normal to us isn't necessarily normal for everybody else. So being able to do something creative, we're not talking Hollywood levels of quality. It's just a story that's personalised, that can show others this is what we're going through, that might also then help others to understand that. I'm thinking about other things we could do along those lines. So things like in school, whether you can get and talk about that, but they might have already understood that. But in a church context, we've got people with sensory needs. So here's a story that might help you understand how we can engage with other people, which is part of life, isn't it?
And I think social media has really helped explode this. So people are able to now express their personal stories out on social media. So I think that's a really lovely outlet, because there's nothing worse than living with it and holding it in and just not knowing and feeling that nobody understands. We know that God does, and that's amazing. And there might be some close friends and family that do. And sometimes that's enough. But there's other times that actually you do want to broadcast to everybody and say, just raise the awareness. Let's be more compassionate. If I'm struggling with something, other people are going to be struggling with something else. But so social media is great for that. Blogs are great. It's just having that outlet for folks to express it, but to express it well.
Well, I'm hoping that the chat with the brainstorm will come back and let me know how he's gone on with some of your suggestions, or what from you said he's been able to use in his situation, in his life, that could maybe help others. Because again, if people see us, they may not know anything. And if someone's got some sensory issues, it may not be a visible thing. We can see a broken leg, right? But we can't necessarily see something in the brain where they're struggling with something, because it's not advertised, is it?
Yeah. And that's it in the Sensory Healthy Church program, christiansensorysupport.com/church. There's even like lanyards, there's badges, just even within that context, as a way of communicating to other people and having a logo up on the church to be able to say, look, we're here to express to others, especially if you go on holiday and you want to go somewhere and you want to fellowship. But you don't know where to go. And so we are creating a register, a directory, so that churches can be put on there, or even if there's any other environment that wants to be put on there, but just so that they are sensory healthy, and that they will acknowledge, they will ask questions, they will want to respect, and they will have accommodations and different things available to help.
Yeah, that's really good. The other thing that we touched on last week, it was encouraging to see people were, this is really helpful, this is really great. But the other one was about things like socks and cereal on the socks. We were having a conversation as a family about, there were 5 senses when we were at school. What happened? There's more than 5 senses. And so that was quite an interesting conversation. So that 8th group of senses that can affect so many things, like, do we need to go to the toilet? And we learn these instinctively as children, but of course, as we become adults, it changes. So is that the sort of thing where we don't know that we're full? Is that sort of connected into that? Because we're forgetting what the senses were? Yeah.
We're just either we're so distracted because so many people are actually on their phones or screens or whatever when they're eating, and therefore we're not recognizing, we're not perceiving, because the brain is paying attention to other things. Sometimes we've got too much stress in the system, and that totally just... Anybody who's been to an interview, you know what it's like, that you hear a question, but it's kind of like it's gone, it's just disappeared. It's just, oh, sorry, can you repeat that, please? Because the stress affects auditory memory. The stress affects so many different things, and it will affect our internal perception of what is going on inside. Toileting wise, being able to describe emotions even. People can feel things inside them, but they can't necessarily pinpoint if they are anxious, if they are hungry, are they concerned about something, are they just finding the right words to connect to a sensation, to a feeling inside.
A few of my friends have talked about, especially dementia, which it picks up on something you said, where they say, well, they don't seem to know that they're full, or they don't seem to want to eat savoury foods, because that's to do with the brain, right? So there's something going on where signals are getting mixed. So is that a similar thing where they just don't know that they're full, so they just eat and eat and eat?
Yeah, big time. And that's what I love about sensory processing issues, that it goes across all ages and all stages. It is the underpinning of so many ways of being. And especially when it does come to dementia, so right at the far end of life, is as other areas of function decrease, and naturally the brain and the body ages. What we revert back to, what goes last, is normally the senses. There is some misunderstandings and misinterpretations in the earlier stages of dementia, and then right as we progress through, it's how we can connect. We can use sensory input in a really beautiful way to connect with people, using the touch system well, if they've had good touch experiences in their life. We can use smell to bring back memories of things that they have loved doing in the past, maybe connections to their husbands, who may have passed on, their aftershave, and can bring back lovely memories. The same way we can use the auditory system for music, sounds, bird song, all of those things, just to really connect with people. So sensory input is lovely at all ages and all stages.
So do you have advice then for people who are struggling with not necessarily full-on dementia? I had a friend who they had the symptoms of dementia, but it wasn't. It was more of a cancer on the brain that then replicated many of the symptoms of dementia. But you're saying that some of these sensory things that you do, actually, that would help people with dementia and the families around them as well?
Because it affects so many areas. There is that, more than anything, we want connection with people, and that can be the first thing to go. So it's trying to find as many physical things to connect with people, enabling them to continue to do as many things practically, physically, that they can for themselves, and just tuning into the senses. And discerning, assessing, and finding out which ones are starting to go, and get in there and try and support them as best possible.
So how could we then, if we're family members going to see someone who is starting to struggle or is very much along that journey of struggle, how can we use a greater understanding of sensory issues to, I suppose, engage better, to reduce some of the frustrations because the memory is lost? How can we use sensory understanding to help with that?
I would go through all of the senses and assess each of them and find out, again, trying to find the strengths more than anything. We always start from a place of strength to shore up areas where they're not so strong. Some people like to work on work weaknesses, for want of a better word, and that has its place. But often I personally start from their strengths and then reach out to areas that might not be so strong. So start with the strengths. Look at the things that they can do, from visually, again, auditory, smell, their movement systems. Are they quite good at getting themselves up and out of a chair? Can they move around? Does actually movement or dancing or going for a walk, does that make them more alert? Does that make them more engaged? Does it make them easier to communicate with? Are they better after having had a little bit of even if it's a seat dance, if they're not actually physically able to get up so much anymore, still having that movement, still stimulating the vestibular system, can raise sensory engagement and integration, and their arousal levels and their motivation, their level of alertness, so that we can then start communicating or helping them to function or do something positive following that.
So things like smells could be a really simple way of engaging with an individual who is struggling with early or later stages of dementia, but actually just a smell that they still can connect to could then help you to connect to them. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's slowly and systematically working through, slowing everything down that we make judgments about, and taking the time to look carefully at each of the senses, and taking the time to think about how could we input into each of those senses in a way that we can get that connection.
That's really interesting, because one of the things that you were suggesting for the person that was struggling from a brain trauma was about making things bigger, like a font size bigger, so that your brain is then able to move at a slower pace. Do you think there's some issues around sensory development that is to do with the speed at which we work through social media, through computers? through smart speakers. You know, we don't have to think how to type anymore. We just type and it kind of fixes it for us. Do you think that our engagement through, I mean, we're speaking via video, which is interesting irony in my question, but do you think stuff like this is changing how we are able? Is there a detriment, do you think, to social media in terms of our sensory things?
I think it's a fascinating question. It'd be really interesting to see over time what things come to the fore, and more research, and the more we investigate who we are and how we are. I definitely think, I know that it's affecting attention, that's for sure. And the way that our brain is able to settle in, our attention spans getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I have no evidence to be able to prove anything from an actual specific sensory perspective. That there is plenty that we do know, and that behaviours and functions that we do know, because of that lack of integration, that lack of good development and connection from the womb upwards. So, but that's as much as I can comment on that one, I think. And
no, that's fine. It just struck me as I was thinking about how we engage with things. I mean, Amazon same day delivery, we talk about the fast paced world, that's fine. But literally, and if we buy on Amazon, we expect it the same day if we're near enough to a city. And how much of that mentality towards life is affecting everything, and then negatively affecting our sensory engagement with people and with life, because we're expecting immediate, not even satisfaction or gratification, just an immediate response. And then if we're speaking to somebody else, then we can expect that same response from someone who doesn't have that engagement like we do. Therefore, there's going to create more of a tension. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's when if you do have a typical brain, we are all adjusting, and we are all being stimulated to think faster. We are in environments that are really noisy. Even now, the fact there's a big surge into nurseries. So children that may have been at home, say for the first 5 years, all of that is disappearing, or lots of that is disappearing as well. I think there are moves for, folks moving into home education, that there's moves away. But I think society in general is becoming a lot more cluttered. I think toxic's a bit of a strong word, but there's more clutter in the environment for the things that we hear, that we see, that we smell, that the biz and the buzz and everything that is going on. I think our society is definitely flooding our senses more, and most of us are adjusting to it. And being able to process things quicker. But if you do have an issue, or someone does have an issue, then I think it makes it worse for them, and it doesn't help us to be more compassionate, because we're expecting everybody else to be living at the same pace that we are. And I think that we've forgotten just quite how we really ought to be. It's very good and very healthy for us, for our brains to be slowing down. And therefore the retreats out to the country, really important, and to hear things differently, not always to have the cars in the background, not always to have all of the sound and the sights and the smells of our city lives and our village lives even sometimes.
So it makes me think about something else then. So we often kind of joke about, we're chatting to our parents on a video chat, and they can't understand how to press the right buttons. And there's a sort of an ongoing joke about that in films and whatever. But how do we help grandparents engage with grandchildren where their sensory abilities are totally very different? How do we help, grandparents and grandchildren really engage well? Or even just in a church context, or in a business context where you've got different ages of people, restaurants, whatever, where 2-3 generations apart, they're going to have a very different understanding of sensory engagement. How can we help people engage with each other better, perhaps a couple of generations apart, with their senses?
I think that's what the power of it in that, I think, will come from using different senses. I think visually, because of screens, there is a massive difference in processing and perception, and the speeds at which people want things visually to go. But the tactile system, the touch system, and the body systems, this proprioceptive system, I think those are real areas of connection. depending on the context that folks are in. But if you have, grandparents and grandchildren at home, it would be absolutely getting hands in with messy play, doing the gardening together, washing the car together, those physical movements that you are doing, that you're having a shared experience. As I say, gardening, you've got your hands in, you're collecting things, you're moving, you're pushing wheelbarrows, which is all really good sensory development. And it's lovely when younger ones can help older ones that might not be so physically fit anymore. But it's a lot of that physical activity that's so important and powerful to our sensory systems to keep us happy and satisfied, regulated and coordinated. And everyday activities, if we are purposefully and intentionally aware of the activities that we do, can be really helpful. So I would, as far as generations are concerned, I would very much be going for how we can share touch experiences and physical movement experiences together. So the likes of the washing the car or the washing the windows is just, the water that you are sharing. And just having that sensory input that both will normally appreciate or understand what those things are.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember watching something about it was a retirement home for people, and they had quite a lot of adults with dementia, and they were very unique because they had an approach whereby they would get the people who were residents not just to be cared for, but to care for the home that they were all sharing. So they were getting into paint walls, and they had a tuck shop, and they put it into sort of 1970s colours because that's when they would have thought about a tuck shop in a youth club. And it was a great way because they were engaging, and I'm understanding it now more from what you're saying, because they're engaging with not just senses and smells, but colours and things that were going to trigger memories rather than just say, do you remember when?
Yes.
Actually, they were able to live for that moment, and it made sense to them. And there was, what the manager was saying is they're much more relaxed because they're now part of it. Rather than us just caring to them, now we're caring for each other. And that's all part of the sensory thing, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And what the loveliest thing is when I've seen in some of the, some for older folk, bringing in babies so they can get that touch. They can just hold them. And goodness me, is that really settling? You've got that deep touch pressure going into their bodies, but then there's that emotional connection. And that's, again, so many people, whether it be teenagers or older people, don't always have positive touch anymore. I'm a big hugger. So if anybody does see me, okay, it would be nice to know who you are before you come and give me a hug. But essentially, I will always love a hug. I really appreciate my touch system. And it's one of my love languages, I suppose. Just a touch or a pat or a caress or a hug or something. It's just lovely. But we don't get positive touch often. And I think it's how can we as a society bring in more positive touch? So yes, bringing babies into nursing homes, bringing children even just to play and see them or climb on your lap or snuggle in and read them a book. Those are really powerful, underestimated. People don't realise the power of those things.
And simple things.
Yeah, they are simple things. I loved it when there was, we saw it, we've had it here, people on the streets, and it was like, give someone a hug. I don't know if you have them over there. I don't know who else does them around the place, but people literally going on the streets, but having a sign that, I'm here if you want a hug. And I think that's lovely because people go down sexual routes, they go down all kinds of routes to try and meet those needs. Whereas if we can provide positive touch, then people won't seek that sensory input in a more inappropriate way.
This comes back to focusing on the strengths and the positives, isn't it? And working with those. Thank you so much, Anne. Again, people were so bold over last week. Just the comments I got was, she's so compassionate, she's so knowledgeable, she's making this that's kind of an interesting into a really fascinating topic even more so. So, I'm looking forward to more and more of these. If people want to know more, then get in touch. hello@pure247radio.org and send your questions, and we'll pass them on to Anne to answer for you here on the radio. So, Anne, thank you as ever. It's been a pleasure. It's always a learning thing for me. It's great. I'm really starting to see more of how sensory issues actually affects us all in so many different ways. I'm starting to understand it. So I'm really grateful for that, for myself, let alone anything else. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share and to chat and to answer questions. Thank you.
Great. Give us your website that people can best make contact with you if they want to find out more.
AnneLaureJackson.com.
Cool. And we'll add that onto the video as well when it goes out, which it will do. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again next week.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.